The fourth panel of the conference shifted the emphasis from diversity, equity, and inclusion to considerations of social theory, examining different social theories, concepts of civic friendship, and the oppressor-oppressed dynamic. The panelists were asked a simple question: are we friends or are we enemies?
But it does seem to me that if you wanted to ask where is this notion of social justice in Aquinas, it would be in the idea of legal justice, where legal justice does not mean following the positive law of your local society, right? But submitting your activity to the order of the natural law. And the force of social justice then is not primarily on distributive justice, on how resources will be allocated. That is a part of it. But the force of social justice is that all people have a responsibility to do what they can to contribute to the goods of society. And that might mean noticing where other people are deprived of an opportunity to make that contribution and to support them. But it does put the obligation of social justice on individual people and not on a powerful entity, a policy, or a top-down structure. One of the things that I want to note about Sohrab Ahmari's reflections on Cardinal Manning is that when Cardinal Manning got involved in the dock workers' strike, right, his solution wasn't to go and petition Parliament to pass a new law for a minimum wage. Right? It wasn't a policy solution. He went and talked to the dock workers and learned from them about what their needs and wants were, and then he went and talked to the capitalists, the owners, who had an obligation to pay them, and learned about what their pressures were, and he worked with both of them, and he supported the strike as a means of action. But notice the strike is individual people deciding that they are going to work together to make their needs known, and then he, I don't know all the details as well as Sohrab does, right? But the story that he told was not a story of, okay, we need a new policy, we need a new law. Sometimes we do, and sometimes social justice does require revising laws. But if it's a structural evil in an economic system, right, that might be actually better solved by figuring out how people can better work together to find their common goods than simply stipulating in law this is what people should be paid. I'm not necessarily making a case against minimum wage efforts, but the tendency in our society when we see a structural evil is to want a top-down solution to it. Whereas it seems to me that in the Catholic and Thomistic tradition, when you see a structural evil, that puts a responsibility on every member of society, especially those who most see clearly what the structural evil is, to actively take a share in addressing that in their concrete individual actions.
Now, as I'm reading Bell, I'm immediately struck by a very challenging prescription regarding a bleak outlook. He writes this, quote, "Black people will never gain full equality in this country. Even those Herculean efforts we hail as successful will produce no more than temporary peaks of progress, short-lived victories that slide into irrelevance. This is a hard-to-accept fact that all history verifies. We must acknowledge it and move on to adopt policies based on what I call racial realism. This mindset or philosophy requires us to acknowledge," and here's the phrase that sticks out to me, "the permanence of our subordinated status." He goes on to talk about the possibility for triumph that only becomes possible when there's an abandonment of the kind of despair that equality is some kind of promise to which we can attain. But it remains opaque to me what kind of triumph you might imagine if subordinated status is permanent. And in fact, John Powell, another legal scholar, both of them Christians, he says racial realism not only fails to address the real problem of racism, but it is also unsuccessful in avoiding despair. Indeed, it may not only add to our despair, but may also diminish our humanity. So he wants to rephrase Bell and say, we cannot know if we will achieve equality. And I think in that kind of uncertain, narrow, agnostic window, That's one in which I could possibly imagine friendship. And in fact, there's an ethics that attends the permanent subordinate status that I think makes friendship difficult, if not impossible.
Second, I think this is critically important. It worked when we helped people to learn how to take the perspective of others. When you focus in on that, then diverse training tended to work. So teaching people, and by the way, everyone, on how to take perspective of others is very effective. Which leads me to a concept that I sort of have alighted upon, and there's other terms for it, but called collaborative conversations. And you define that by conversations where you build on the ideas of, goal-oriented conversations. So it's not talking about the weather. Goal-oriented conversations where you build on the ideas of others to find a solution. Because then you find solutions where everyone feels like they've had their say into the solution, and they work together to bring it about. If we want DEI to produce friendships rather than create more enemies, we need to change the way we're doing it. We need to look at how we can facilitate better conversations to better problem solving, to teach people, because unfortunately we don't know how to do this any longer. In a polarized society, I mean, this is the worst time to talk about this in a presidential year, of course. But we don't know how to talk to people in a way in which we're actually building consensus. We talk to people in polarizing ways, and we have us and them. We need to find out ways in which we can talk with each other and work together to find solutions. And if diversity, I'm convinced that if DEI starts doing this, then we're going to see a lot better outcomes. We're going to see a lot better long-term outcomes. Short-term is going to be painful, but I think we're going to see a lot better long-term outcomes in this way.
The Beyond the Impasse conference was a success, and we're now in the process of developing the next series of seminars and working groups that are going to connect our work with leaders in the worlds of business and education. If you're interested in learning more or would like to support our work, please follow the links in the video or in the description below. Thank you very much for your attention and for your help.